The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, The Intersection of Safety and HR, presented by our sponsor, Heffernan. We're so happy you can join us. My name is Amanda Ramatar, and I will be your moderator today, and I will also be monitoring questions you may have during the session. Before we open up the session, let's review a couple of key items. All of the webinar materials we discuss can be found at the URL showing on your screen. I will be sharing this URL in a follow-up email, so don't feel like you need to write it down right now. If you have trouble with your internet connection during the webinar, we recommend leaving the presentation and logging back in. We do not control the audio. Your devices control the audio. So if you have audio difficulties, try adjusting the volume settings on your device. If a telephone line goes dead during the call, hang up and call back again to the same number. If all lines go dead, watch the on-screen chat box for an alternative call-in number. Feel free to ask questions or provide feedback by using the chat box or questions box during the webinar. If you are using a tablet, you may need to tap on the screen for the options bar to appear, then you can select the appropriate option. We may not respond immediately, but we will work your questions or feedback into the presentation. If we can't get to your comment or question during the session, we will be online afterwards to respond. Or we may follow up in an email if we run completely out of time. You may also email us at moderator@aspenrmg.com for up to 48 hours after the webinar. This will be a 1-hour presentation. Questions and comments are very much encouraged throughout, and the presenters will be answering questions at the end. And lastly, we have a number of upcoming webinars covering a variety of topics, including those listed at the Heffernan webinar website. In addition, we offer the mandatory preventing harassment training in English 3 times a year. With that, let's begin today's webinar, The Intersection of Safety and HR. Our presenters today are Erica Baird and Phaedra Buxman. Erica is a safety, health, and risk management consultant with over 15 years of experience in the insurance and safety industries. She has had the opportunity to work with a variety of industries such as construction, retail, manufacturing, education, agriculture, and service industries, and has presented on numerous safety topics over the years. She has a bachelor's degree in psychology and Spanish, an associate's degree in occupational safety and health, and has earned a number of designations in insurance and safety, including ASP, CPCU, and ARM. She is a senior risk and safety consultant at Aspen Risk Management Group. Phaedra is a human resources professional for both large and small companies, and she specializes in safety training and employee retention. She believes that the activities behind the scenes should always be guided by a company's best practices, and that this is invaluable to employers and employees. Her experience includes loss control, operations, HR, retail, and banking. With her ability to maintain and coordinate with multiple safety professionals and safety management systems, she conducted HR and safety trainings for a large Fortune 500 company and feels that safety and HR best practices should be built into the culture of a company. She believes safety is taught not just by simple instruction, but by example and repetition. She has a heartfelt desire to assist people and to teach them how to be safer in the way they do things, with the priority being placed upon building positive interactions on all levels and aiding in increasing the overall effectiveness of the client's loss control and safety programs. Thank you so much for being with us today, ladies. Let me turn the presentation over to you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Phaedra and me today to talk about safety and HR. We're both pretty passionate about this subject because we've actually seen over and over again the difference that it can make when safety and HR departments work together, and then the problems that are created when they try to operate separately. So first things first, we need to start with this disclaimer. So the information that we're presenting today is general in nature, and it's intended to present an overview of employment practices. The written and verbal contents of the presentation are not intended to constitute any consulting or advice, and no client relationship is established between the presenter and the attendees.
Thank you so much, Erica and Amanda, for getting us all set up. So When we think about safety and HR in our workplaces, it can be hard to see how those two are very interwoven into the success and profitability of an organization or even with each other. Oftentimes, these two departments may work with a little strategic planning between them, making it so that these two departments exist in their own silos. But the organization and its employees would benefit greatly from seeing how these two departments intersect and how one can help the other, which in turn helps everyone in the organization. When we think about HR and some of the top items that we might think of HR being responsible for, those items are generally the hiring and firing of employees, improving overall retention, supporting the workforce and supervisors, as well as complying with the regulations.
So while both HR and safety departments care about employees, we actually have different methods of reaching company goals around protecting employees, ensuring profitability, and protecting the company's reputation. For safety, the focus is typically on implementing strategies that are designed to prevent incidents. And that could include training employees or enforcing safety rules. The safety department also has to be aware of OSHA regulations and needs to ensure the operations are in compliance with these.
So now let's take a look at how safety and HR intersect. So where do they meet up? Where do they kind of overlay with each other? And how can we benefit from that? So each department needs to hire and train employees. HR usually plays a role in the following aspects. We set up the interviews, the hiring process, conduct the new hire orientation. We work on the disciplinary action and employee recognition, regulatory compliance, and then the consistency for the organization. When we're talking about consistency, right? We want each department to be handling situations with the same process and outcome so that it's fair. But safety is also a key part of those items. Erica, how can safety participate in these aspects?
Actually, safety can be heavily involved in each aspect of the employee-employer relationship, and it's really important to include and talk about the safety culture at each level. Starting with the hiring process, if our goal with safety is to protect our employees, the last thing we want to do is hire someone who isn't going to fit our safety culture. HR looks at whether the employee will fit the workplace culture already, but getting a feel for how they fit in with the safety culture is important too. You can ask questions during the hiring process to get an idea of how much safety knowledge and exposure an applicant has, and if they're likely to follow safety rules or disregard them during that hiring process. Once hired, the new hire orientation should focus heavily on safety as a company value. It should be reinforced by every level of the organization, from the company president to the supervisor to the safety manager to the new hired coworkers. But it also has to be enforced. The company's disciplinary action plan should also apply to safety, and the process should be consistent whether the employee is in trouble for coming in late or for not wearing their safety glasses. The other side of safety and the other side of this is recognizing employees for doing the right thing, right? We have disciplinary action, but we also want to recognize employees. When safety and HR work together to recognize and discipline employees, the consistency there helps to reinforce safety expectations. Consistency, as Phaedra was saying, is important as it relates to other departments too. So if your production crew follows one guideline and the maintenance team has a different guideline, you can run into issues. Consistency between the two ensures that everyone understands the rules, they're applied the same, and it helps the company overall with compliance. Regulations may affect safety and HR differently, but the importance of staying on top of changing standards and meeting or exceeding what's required is the same between the two departments. So it looks like we have that first poll question.
And on this polling question, you can click as many of these as apply to your organization. And once you have put in your answer, Amanda will go through some of the responses and give us a little snippet of an overview of how some of you have responded. So while I sit here and talk, that gives you a little bit of time to read them and put in your answers. And then we'll give you about an extra 30 or so seconds after that.
Awesome. And I usually wait until I have about 70% voted. So we're at about 56% right now. These answers aren't going to be anything that you get graded on, so do feel free to interact with us. Promise we won't judge. So we're at almost 70% now. So I will close the poll and I will read the results. We have 98% who said interview or hiring process, 91% who said new hire orientation, 83% said disciplinary action, 66% said employee recognition, and 2% said I'm not sure.
Those are some pretty good results there. All right, so most of us are doing the interview and hiring process. That's kind of to be expected, and then orientation. And then kind of as you work down the list, we had fewer people doing those things, and that happens a lot. So it's not a big surprise there. Okay, so COVID-19. I know that the last thing any of us want to talk about is COVID-19, but when it comes to HR and safety departments working together, this is actually a really great example of how we got it right. So if I can just drag all of you back for a couple of seconds to January and February of 2020, I want to remind you what we were dealing with back then, right? At that point, we've been watching China get ravaged by this virus that no one had seen before, and we didn't really know anything about it. We knew that it was contagious, but we had no idea at that point how it was spread, and we were kind of hoping that it wouldn't affect the United States. And then a few cases popped up, and then it was here, right? So states tried to provide us with some direction, starting with shutting things down, because they had this theory that if we just went for 2 weeks without interacting with anyone, the virus would have run its course and we could go back to normal. And all but essential operations closed their doors. But it didn't work. So then we had to figure out how to reopen businesses and how to keep employees safe. Do you guys remember who did that? It was safety and HR working together. We created plans to bring everyone back to work and to try to do it in the safest way possible. Every company was dealing with something different, and we were all looking to the CDC for guidance. And the guidance back then was to wear a cloth mask and to keep 6 feet away from others. So we redesigned workstations. We added partitions to separate people from anyone they had to speak to face-to-face. We mandated the use of face masks. We trained employees so that they would know what was required. We hung up posters everywhere and reinforced the rules. And the situation just kept changing, because then we found out that the virus was airborne and 6 feet might help a little, but it wasn't really doing us as much good as we thought, and the partitions weren't that useful. We had to keep changing and evolving. We got to know all the different types of masks that were available. And we all tried to find masks for employees to wear when there was a shortage for even healthcare workers. We wrote plans for COVID prevention in states where that was required, and then we modified them for every rule change, and it was exhausting. But HR and safety departments get through it together, and we did prevent a lot of illnesses. Some companies only had a handful or even no work-related COVID illness. And this is a really good example of what can be accomplished when safety and HR departments work together.
So that shows us that COVID-19 was a great example of HR and safety working, pardon the pun, hand in hand, but at a safe distance, as Erica has just discussed with us. But why might it have worked so well? Part of that is because everyone was talking about it. We had reminders in front of us from when we woke up till when we went to bed. These consistent reminders with reinforcement of the controls that had been developed and implemented helped to serve as an ongoing enforcement of keeping our distance, washing our hands, using sanitizer, as well as using other forms of PPE. These things, these specific controls and the actions pretty much became second nature to us. Humans do really well with repetition. We can look at this, the COVID-19 example, as a great example of HR and safety working together to help control a hazard and to protect employees.
How involved is HR in safety at your organization? I'm just gonna wait until 70%, like I said. We're getting some votes coming in now.
So are you saying that because they've done this once and now they're doing this a second time, it's repetitive and it's a little faster?
I see what you did there. All right, we're a little over 50%. We're creeping up to 70. All righty, folks, we have hit our 70% mark, so I'm going to close the poll and I'm going to read the results. We have 33% who said they participate in facility walkthroughs. 60% say they are involved in disciplinary action. 42% say they participate in the safety committee. 32% say they are a separate department. And 35% say they are involved in all of these.
Okay, good. So we have a good mix there. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about why, as safety people, it's helpful to engage HR. So listed here, we have 3 primary safety duties, and you saw these in this poll question. Developing programs, safety committees, and facility walkthroughs. These are traditional safety roles, right? But HR, by engaging them and having them participate in these functions, you can actually help to improve your overall results. When you're writing a safety program, for example, it should always reflect your company's specific operations, and it should be consistent with the other programs that are already in place. So if you're a safety person, every once in a while you start working on a safety program and then you find out that HR is also working on a similar program, or maybe they already have something in place and you just didn't know about it because it wasn't with the safety document. If you have to develop a new safety program or you're updating an old one, it's important to get HR involved, right? Have them look it over, let them know what you're working on so they can tell you if they already have something, and get their input so that you can make sure that your program is in line with other company policies. That consistency is really important for employees because it reinforces the concept of safety as a value when your safety programs are in line with other company policies and everyone is on the same page. The safety committee is another place where HR can help. As your committee is discussing safety issues and trying to figure out how to correct a hazard or what to do about a recent incident, the HR department representative can provide guidance to ensure that whatever strategy you implement to correct that situation, it's in line with your other company policies. And they can also provide feedback on regulations specific to their operations that might force you to change your strategy. It's always better to know about this kind of thing in advance so you don't go ahead and implement a program only to have to go back and change it later. And it can also be helpful for HR to do facility walks with you. It actually helps HR to better understand the operations and the work conditions. So it helps them with hiring and answering questions from prospective employees, but it also lets you add a new set of eyes to the inspection process, because as they ask questions to better understand how things work, they might actually spot something you've been walking past for years. So having a different point of view on these walks can actually help you to better protect employees.
Absolutely. I think being engaged in those safety walks and the operations is very important. It helps us to do better at what we do as HR professionals, and that takes us into looking a little deeper into how HR and safety continue to intersect. So for the hiring process, HR can build some questions into the interview format. Erica touched a little bit on this earlier, but some of those questions could be something like, what was safety like at the last company you worked for? What role did you play in safety in your previous positions? How can you help keep yourselves and others safe at work? Now, you're looking at these questions wondering how that can be helpful, right? Well, if a candidate has a negative answer or makes statements which show they may have a view of safety that's negative, that may mean that they're not a good candidate for your organization, for your operation, right? If they were to say, oh, you know, that safety guy, he was just always causing problems or slowing things down. We kind of want to listen to those statements and see what we gather from it. Now, how else can HR help in filtering candidates so that hiring managers have the right person for the job? We can set up pre-hire medical or drug screenings. So we need to have the proper job descriptions, and with those, HR can help develop medical requirements that are job specific. HR would work with an occupational clinic, and they would have been set up and selected to have pre-hire tests conducted. And now this is where I'll throw in an asterisk. That's a post-offer, pre-hire. And by having these requirements, the process is in place, and processes in place, HR can help managers ensure they have a good candidate for the position they are hiring for. Now, what does that mean, right? If we have a very physical job, which is picking up and putting down or moving an item 4 or 5 times per hour, and that item weighs, we'll just grab a number, in excess of 50 pounds, right? We don't ever want to make our hiring decisions based off of gender or body type or any protective category, but we can make good decisions by having these pre-hire tests conducted. You've set up with the clinic, they go to the clinic and do these physical requirement tests. And let's say a candidate who maybe we visually thought, or in our conversations, they said they could conduct this type of lifting for 8 hours a day, but in the screening, what we find is physically they can't. Well, we have helped get the better candidate for the position, and potentially we've also helped keep from sustaining a work comp injury.
Which is, it's so important to make sure that the candidate that you bring on and you bring in to do the work is capable of doing those tasks, because ideally you don't want to hire someone only for them to get injured. You're hiring to fill a role and fill a position. So it's so important to have that kind of policy in place. It can make a big difference. And that kind of leads us right into new hire orientation, right? The best time to establish that safety is a value at an organization is right there at the very beginning. And showing a united front is one way to do this. So as an employee goes through their training and orientation, they're going to receive an employee handbook and various HR policies get covered. Safety should also be part of this session. Integrate the IIPP and safety programs and company safety roles and expectations into this initial introduction to the company, and let new employees hear about safety from different people and different departments. Organizations handle orientation differently depending on their size and the number of people that are hired at any given time. But one way to show a united front is for everyone to be consistent in the messaging about safety. Sometimes HR does the full orientation and then a supervisor picks up on the job training. In other organizations, safety departments can be more involved in presenting the program to each new hire or to groups of new hires. It depends on how the organization works, right? In any case, the message from the executive level to HR to the safety department and the employee supervisor has to be the same. Safety is integral to our operations and every employee plays a role. Set out the company's expectations for safety, including how that ties to disciplinary action. Ask new employees to contribute to your safety culture by telling their supervisor if they have any safety concerns, and encourage them to ask questions as they go through training to make sure that they understand how to do their job duties in the safest way possible.
Look at that. Repetition didn't help me there. I was a little slow on the click. So now, how can HR help lay the groundwork? Well, we want to take into account things we can do in advance, right? So as with nearly everything we know about or do, the more we know, the better our preparations, the better the outcome, as well as the smoother the overall process can be. So the HR team should have the following processes in place before an accident has happened. We want to know what clinic is supposed to be used, who is going to be providing the transport for the injured person, and who needs to be notified, as well as is the incident an OSHA reportable accident. So managers need to be trained on these items, as well as they need to know where to find resources about these items in case they need them. With many other things in life, right, we know that sending out reminders and providing updates and refreshers on a regular basis is highly beneficial. We can help keep our managers and our employees knowing where to get this content and answers from.
So Phaedra just talked about how important it is to have a plan in place when an accident happens. Everyone needs to know in advance what they're supposed to do so that they're prepared. This idea also extends outside of the organization. So typically, when someone is injured, claims management is handled in human resources, but by working together to establish policies for return to work, you can reduce the number of indemnity claims that you have and reduce claims costs overall. This should start with working with the clinic that you use for treating employees. You want to share your policies and procedures with others who can have an impact on claims after an accident occurs. So the clinic should know that you have a policy to return employees to work as soon as possible. And to make their jobs easier, you can provide the clinic with a copy of your job descriptions or agree to send one with the employee when they go for treatment. This helps the medical provider because then they can see what the physical capabilities are required, what physical capabilities are required for the employee in order to do their job. And that can help with designing restrictions for returning to work. If they know that you want to bring everyone back as soon as possible and that you'll provide modified work for them, then they're only going to take people off of work who really can't do the work at all. And that can impact goals that both HR and safety have as far as reducing the cost of claims and bringing employees back to work so that you don't have to temporarily fill their position. It's also helpful to have a good relationship with your fire department. And I'm not talking about your annual inspection that the fire marshal does. The fire department can actually help you with training employees, doing emergency drills, teaching employees how to use extinguishers, and they can be very useful in determining how to meet different building code and fire safety requirements. So they're a great resource. Beyond that, it's important for them to be familiar with your facility so that if there is a serious injury, they can respond appropriately. If they know where to go, what the building layout looks like, and the types of hazards that they might encounter there, it enables them to do their jobs more quickly and get to your injured employee faster when there is an emergency. So that relationship can help both to improve safety compliance and to make the emergency handling process, right, that whole response faster.
My organization does an accident investigation after. One of these options is okay. I was wondering, Phaedra and Erica, I had a question come in. Would you like to address it only at the end of the presentation, or would you like to maybe use this time to address it?
I'm okay with waiting till the end because we should have a little bit of a few extra minutes at the end, and that way we stay on path for now, and it's possible the question could get answered.
Sounds good. Thank you. All right, so we have about 50% coming in. I'm hoping to get a few more votes in before we close the poll.
And don't worry, everybody, the next polling question is going to be completely different, and you have to learn a new process. So we're going to throw repetition out the window on the next question.
Awesome. All right, folks. Well, I think we're close enough, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results. One moment. We have 12% said near-miss incidents, 31% said property damage incidents, 53% said injury incidents, 44% said all of the above, and 12% said none of the above.
Okay, so there's a good mix again. But once an accident has happened, an employee is injured and requires medical treatment, that's when a claim is filed. And at that point, someone needs to be responsible for managing the claim and someone needs to investigate the incidents. We want to investigate those incidents because we want to prevent similar incidents from happening again, right? That's the whole goal with that. So that's why we talk about investigating near-miss incidents and investigating actual accidents where people get injured, because we can learn from both of those situations. So once you've had an accident, you've got a claim, there should be a clear procedure for who's going to manage the claim, who's going to investigate the accident, and then a way for both those parties to communicate, because the information that's learned in the accident investigation can impact the claim and vice versa. So for example, if the investigation determines that the employee was under the influence of drugs or alcohol when they were injured, that could be a determining factor in how the claim is handled. And on the other hand, if the injured worker went to the clinic after lacerating a finger, but the claim indicates that the employee has a sprained ankle, then the investigator might need more information about what actually happened. So often, human resources manages claims while the safety department investigates the incident. but making sure that the employee is properly cared for and brought back to work requires both. When an accident investigation is completed, the findings have to make sense to everyone. In order for HR to understand the findings, they need to have a good understanding of the operations, which they would get from doing those facility walks that we talked about earlier with the safety department. Another thing that helps them is interacting with employees, but it can also be helpful to complete the investigation together. Having someone else to bounce ideas off of during an investigation can make a difference. Discussing it helps to ensure that both safety and HR understand what went wrong and what needs to be done to fix it.
So part of what HR can do, except for I think I just clicked on the wrong slide. Let me go back one. Sorry, Erica, you're good. I'm bad. All right. So how can HR help show that we care as a company? Well, now we're going to get into a little bit more favorite part, and that's the human aspects of HR and how we can help control losses. Communication is key and should be a joint effort. A lot of this falls on HR, but safety and the employee's supervisor can also support this effort. If the employee thinks or feels that the company doesn't want them back or views them, the employee, in a negative manner, this can create barriers to the employee's recovery and return. I mean, heck, the barriers may not even really exist, but they could be presumed to exist. If the employer shows compassion for the employee, it can go a long way towards fostering positive feelings and interactions. Don't stop communicating with an injured employee because they have a workers' comp claim. A simple way to check in with an employee is by sending them a get well card. Get their supervisors or the safety team to have their coworkers sign that card. Call them, see how the medical visit went. Are they comfortable with the medical treatment? Do they need assistance with their claim? Let them know that they're still important and that based upon the doctor's requirements, following the restrictions as needed, the company is looking forward to having them return to work. One of the best ways to make sure the employee feels important is to have their supervisor involved in these periodic check-ins. Their relationship with the company is primarily through their supervisors, so maintaining that relationship is important. Keep track of their treatment information and the timeline. Set follow-up reminders both with the medical provider, the employee, and the claims manager. If the company doesn't have a job that fits within the restrictions of the employee, consider partnering with an outside agency to help get the employee on the return to work process and accommodating restrictions. The safety committee can help with coming up with ideas for return to work based on an employee's restrictions.
Yeah, so it's kind of great to use the safety department and the supervisor in maintaining those relationships, because as Phaedra mentioned, there's some studies that show that employees primarily have a relationship with their supervisor, and interacting with HR can sometimes not make them feel as comfortable or as wanted by the company, but hearing from their supervisor and from their coworkers reinforces that the whole company cares about them. And hearing from those people who they talk to on a regular basis, it makes a big difference for them.
So now, how is it that HR can continue to help manage the claim? This is after the accident. As the employer, it's important to stay in communication with the claims managers as well. We need to make sure that we stay informed. We communicate with the insurance company, and we have all of our paperwork in order. We share any concerns or anything learned in the accident investigation that might be relevant to the claim. We notify the insurance company if other employees report red flags. The insurance company will determine if there's something that is compensable. The insurance company is also going to determine if red flags can be further investigated based on the law. We want to follow up on the status of the claim until it's closed. Now, why, right? A little bit of the why of following up on it till it's closed. If we just leave it out there open, that impacts the reserves and the insurance. We want to make sure that the employee gets through the entire process as needed and get that claim closed and wrapped up. By staying actively engaged with the employee, the clinic, and the claims manager, then HR can help get the employee back to work sooner and the claim closed in a timely manner. By doing these things, HR can help to reduce the total cost of the claim, as well as reduce the likelihood of a litigated claim. So I'm going to jump on top as Amanda has launched this great little poll box, and you're going to go, but where's the questions? So this is a free form, and we're going to ask you a question, but on your, depending on what operating system you're using, what method you use to log in, you're going to have a chat or a questions box, and that's where you're going to free form type your answer. Our question is, what can HR or a manager do to help an employee return to work sooner? So you're just going to type into your chat or questions box, and once we have a few of those answers, Amanda's going to read those for us. So again, what can HR or a manager do to help an employee return to work sooner? We'll give you a little bit so you can type, because it's more than just clicking on a button. And then Amanda will share some of those responses with us.
I think it's a thought-provoking question. We've got a few, we have a few answers coming in. All right. I'll start naming off a few. So, accommodation, communicate, find a position that meets the modifications set forth by the doctor, modify work, reaching out to let them know they are needed and wanted back, and helping smooth all paperwork, etc., transitions to make it easier. Follow up regularly and request updates for treatment. Offer light job duties. Got a lot coming in. Stay informed. Support the employee. Follow up with employee insurance and clinic and when the claim is closed. HR can help to modify an existing role to fit within their restrictions. Make accommodations for restricted work. Check in with them while out on leave. Work with the doctor, train on safety and lighter duty. Stay in close contact with the injured worker, brainstorm and provide alternative work environment situation to get them back sooner. We're probably only about halfway done, so you guys feel free to cut me off when you've had.
I think those are great. I think I'm hearing a lot of different versions of providing modified work or trying to meet the different restrictions that the doctors issued. One little nugget that I heard in there was somebody said something about helping with paperwork, which is actually, it's great. It's so a lot of employees, they go out on leave and the whole interaction with an insurance company is confusing, and there's a lot of legal stuff that they have to do and paperwork that they get, and they don't know what to do with it. So helping to make sure that their questions get answered and that they have guidance through that process is a huge benefit to the employees. So I like that one that was kind of like smack in the middle of all the ones that you read, but they're all really great ideas. So having that relationship, maintaining the relationship, communicating with the employees, all of those are super important.
Erica?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you think in that same vein, maybe something that we don't touch on too heavily, but that goes in that same concept is by having the injured employee's questions answered by, a physician or by someone from the company, it keeps them from seeking, maybe reaching out to an attorney to get, because all those advertisements tell us that those attorneys are going to answer our questions. And do you think that it's more beneficial to have the employer answering those?
Yeah, it is a great way for employers to, it's kind of a step to help prevent employees from feeling like they need to have an attorney, because this isn't part of the presentation, but we'll dive down this little side track for a second. Essentially, attorneys for workers' comp, what they do, the services that they provide, their payment from that is pretty limited by state. So they're not going to have a ton of time to dedicate to each employee. They're trying to bring in business, right? So for employers, if you can answer employees' questions right up front, help them have some guidance through the process, make sure that they're getting the care that they need, you can actually help to prevent a lot of that interaction with an attorney in the first place. And then a lot of times that attorney interaction doesn't end up benefiting the employee that much because they're going to get paid out for workers' comp based on their injury and based on the guidelines for how long they were off work and their long-term restrictions, or if they can't return to work. All of that stuff is set in stone. And when they have an attorney, a portion of that money ends up going to their attorney. So yes, there's a huge benefit to providing them with some guidance and answering their questions and telling them that you're available to help them up front in terms of the care that they're going to get and avoiding that attorney relationship and going down that path.
Thank you, Erica.
All right, so guidelines from HR. This is another important thing to talk about. Look, managers and supervisors have a lot of responsibilities, everything from meeting production requirements to maintaining equipment and ensuring that employees are safe. And safety in and of itself is a lot to handle, especially when you work for a company that doesn't have a dedicated safety department. New managers and supervisors aren't always aware of all the responsibilities that they're taking on when they accept a promotion. When a person transfers from one position to another, they should receive some training so that they know and understand their new job duties. And managers don't always realize that safety is one of their major new responsibilities. A lot of times the training comes from HR. So in terms of safety, managers and supervisors are responsible for enforcing safety rules, training employees, and recognizing and correcting hazards. But beyond that, they have to take the time to listen to employees and to address their concerns. In addition to ensuring that managers understand their responsibilities as it relates to employee safety, it's also helpful to provide them with resources and guidelines to follow for how to handle different situations. And accidents are a prime example. Accidents are an emergency and it can actually be pretty jarring, right? Depending on what has occurred. So if the manager has a policy to follow that supports HR's needs and makes the claim process simpler and smoother, it can make a huge difference in reducing stress for everyone involved. Having a list of items that HR needs from the manager and a timeline for when they need to be submitted is hugely beneficial. If you want the manager to fill out the first notice of loss, or they need to give the employee certain documents to take to the clinic, or they need to provide contact information or other employee documentation, they need to know that. They also need to know who to contact when an incident has occurred and where to send the injured worker. So Phaedra talked about a lot of these things earlier in terms of having a plan in place, but having a clear process for managers can make a big difference, especially if a manager hasn't had a lot of employee injuries. The first time they run into this, having something they can refer to make sure that they're doing what they need to will reduce their stress and make the whole process smoother for everyone involved.
How can HR help with the employee relations? So HR, we can take the lead in making sure that managers are trained that when employees report an injury, that doesn't make them bad employees or that they're filing fake claims. HR needs to work with and train managers to try and recognize and avoid bias and not use negative connotations about workplace injuries and injured employees. These thoughts and feelings aren't beneficial to the company's culture. A helpful statistic is from the Department of Insurance, the DOI. Their study about work comp claims fraud shows that 1% to 2% of the total cost of claims is from employee fraud. So with that being so low, we don't want to set a tone in our company that work comp claims are filed by bad employees or filing fake claims. So let's not use that type of negativity when we're training managers on how to handle claims or employee reports. Instead, we should build a safety culture of caring. Inform employees that reporting unsafe items and hazards, even potential hazards, is a positive thing. Then, as the employer, make sure those items are corrected and followed up with the reporting employee. By acting on, controlling, and correcting hazards, employees will be shown that the employer cares about them and their safety. Of course, the employer should also regularly remind employees that they are to report injuries, even if it's a minor or a near miss. Those need to be reported promptly. This demonstrates the employer's desire to keep employees safe and to get them the proper treatment that they may need. Each of these interactions reinforces positive views of the safety and the care of the employees versus injuries being viewed in a negative manner. That, of course, isn't to say that an employer finds injuries to be a positive, but they can set the stage for the interactions and the safety culture through positive reinforcement. The accident investigation should keep drilling down on the why an accident or incident happened. The report's outcome shouldn't stop or be solely based on an employee didn't follow safety guidelines. Why? Why didn't the employee follow the guidelines? Was the PPE not provided? Or did they not have the proper equipment? Was the equipment in disrepair? There's a list of whys, and it's important to keep going back until you find the answer that is the fundamental reason the incident occurred. The thing that, if changed, would have created a different outcome. We may not need to go all the way back to creation with our whys, but we want to find what the root cause is and was. An example of this I'd like you to think about when we're talking about drilling back on the whys, right, is you have an employee who slipped and fell. Well, why, right? First, why? Why did they slip and fall? There was water on the floor. Why? Why was there water on the floor? They slipped and fell in the water. The water was there because there was a leaky hose or faucet. Why? Why was the hose or faucet leaking? It had a bad valve. Why? Well, valves go out, right? That's a mechanical type situation. But then what we find out from going further back in our whys, that leaky valve had been reported, a service ticket had been created. Maybe the part got ordered, maybe it didn't get ordered, maybe something needed to be approved. Somewhere in that process, after it had been submitted, the part didn't come in, it didn't get repaired, it continued to leak, the employee fell. So it's not that, this answer isn't that the employee slipped because they were in a hurry, right? They weren't following safety guidelines, they were walking too fast. No, it happened because someone somewhere didn't follow up on an item. And something that we touched on earlier briefly is that follow-up piece, right? When an employee tells us there is a problem and we don't follow up on it, even if it's minor, right? The faucet's dripping slowly. Well, we should find out why it's dripping. Now, if we don't follow up on that and then go back to the employee and say, hey, I looked at the faucet, we're ordering a new valve, thank you so much for bringing it to our attention, right? And we repair it. Perfect, done and done. But let's say they tell us about the faucet and continues to drip. They tell us about the light bulb that's out in the stairwell and somebody has tripped. They tell us one other minor thing, but then we haven't followed up with them. We haven't taken action. They could feel like we don't care. We don't take this seriously. They stop reporting things to us. Now there's a ladder with a bad rung that they're like, oh, I've told my supervisor or the safety person X amount of times about X amount of things and they didn't take action. I'm not going to bother. Then something more severe could happen. So we need to follow up. I know it takes an extra 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, but if we follow up on every report made to the reporting employee, they will keep telling us about these things. And this helps employers to strive to remove barriers in communication. It opens up the pathways, and part of that means explaining to the employees why an accident investigation needs to take place. We aren't looking to place blame, but we're looking to fix and correct a hazard and keep an injury from happening.
Yeah, and that really ties into the idea that safety cultures are based on transparency, right? When investigations take place or new procedures are implemented, you have to meet with employees to provide them with an explanation. Tell them what you learned in that investigation. Listen to their concerns and explain why different procedures have to be implemented. The more that employees understand, the more likely they're going to follow the new procedures. An employee's concerns over changes can give you additional input that might change your initial plan, and that input is really valuable. To have a safety culture, you have to listen to other points of view and incorporate that information into the overall plan. Safety communication has to go both ways, right? That's an OSHA requirement. You should want to hear what employees are concerned about, and you have to address those concerns. And you also want to relay your concerns and what you've done to keep those employees safe and why it's important for them to follow your guidelines. We've spoken about safety as a company value a few times. The reason safety should be a value is because values don't change. They're a compass that guides our way. Priorities change, and when safety is only a priority, something else can very easily become more important. One way to show that safety is a value is to make it part of everyone's evaluations. When complying with safety rules and engaging in the safety culture is an expectation that every employee is striving to meet, you can strengthen your safety culture. It reinforces it. Managers and safety people can sometimes get stuck in a rut of correcting issues because they're constantly reminding other employees to wear the right PPE or slow down or lift with their legs. And as a result, they can lose sight of what's being done right. And HR can help with that. Actually, you can support each other. Sometimes the better way to correct a behavior is not to keep trying to enforce it, but to call out and recognize the people who are doing it right. And that's known as positive reinforcement, something we've talked about a few times. We bring it up because it's really powerful when you do it right. So we want to talk about a few ways to reinforce good behavior.
So when good behavior is used, let's recognize it. It can be as simple as, hey, Erica, thanks for wearing your PPE. Simple, easy reminders are fine. Let's not focus on only providing feedback to correct someone, but let's reinforce when someone does the right thing. Reward the employees who are doing things right and use them as a positive example whenever you get the opportunity.
And remember what we said about transparency. The only way you're going to get employees to do what you want them to do is if you talk about it and talk about it and talk about it, right? You have to find a reason that will motivate them to do what you want them to. Explaining why you want to do something can help, right? Logic and reasoning can work. For some people, you have to find other ways to reach them. So I want to talk about a really common issue, using safety glasses. Lots of facilities will require employees to wear safety glasses when doing certain tasks, and lots of employees ignore this rule. I see it all the time when I walk through facilities. How do you change that? Keep talking to employees. Explain that you want them to wear their safety glasses because you don't want them to damage their eyes. Give them examples of what could happen if they're not wearing their safety glasses. And if that's not enough, ask them why they don't wear them. Maybe they find them uncomfortable or they fog up. And then try to fix that problem and come back to them and push them to do it again. Hey, we bought these new anti-fog wipes that help keep the lenses from fogging over. Or we have 4 different types of safety glasses because we realized that the ones we had before didn't fit everyone. So we made sure to have some different options. And at your next safety meeting, if you don't want to talk about safety glasses again, take just a second from your other topic to thank somebody who's always wearing their safety glasses, right? That's what Phaedra was talking about, that positive reinforcement. If you catch your holdout wearing your safety glasses, make it a big deal in a way that works for that person. And what do I mean by that? Not everyone wants to be called out in a meeting. So if you have a person who's shy, just thank them one-on-one. That's still recognition, that still reinforces that they're doing the right thing and you saw it and you're aware of it. A lot of ways to remind employees about your safety rules, and we talked about a few already, bringing up a common problem in safety meetings, speaking directly with employees. Going back to something that we got right during COVID, we had posters reminding people how to protect themselves everywhere. A really common reminder that you see at retail stores are those signs that say no shirt, no shoes, no service. They're clear and to the point. We've got the same kinds of reminders that we use in safety. So I see posters and signs that remind people about PPE all the time. It might say safety glasses are required beyond this point, or this is a hard hat job site. There are other examples. Some companies post how many days they've gone without a work-related injury. And that's not specific to a safety rule, but it's a reminder that there's a focus on safety at that workplace. So reminders, whether verbal or written, can help to reinforce good behavior as well.
And one of the biggest mistakes that you can make as a manager, as a supervisor, is not following your own safety rules. If you don't follow the rules, you can't expect your employees to do something different. Don't be the manager who doesn't wear the proper PPE. Always have your PPE available and make sure to set a good example for others. This takes us to our last you type it polling question. So our question is this: share something that you learned today. So we'll give you all a little bit of time because we know it takes a little bit of extra time to type in your answer about sharing something that you learned today. It's funny, part of me wants to have a Jeopardy timer counting down in the background. That's not conducive to typing, and neither is me interrupting your thought process.
All right, so we have some answers coming in. Safety is a culture of caring, and it is a value, not just a priority. Ways to be proactive to reduce safety issues are helpful for HR. Sorry, my box is moving. Using posters to reinforce wearing PPE, add safety to evaluate all performance reviews. Keeping in contact with the employee, the importance of having HR know the operations well enough to partner with safety. How to support managers in helping to promote the safety culture in HR. HR needs to play a bigger role in safety. Let me scroll down. Have HR assist risk and accident investigations. HR needs to come to the work site and do walkthroughs, communication. Reach out to injured employees to offer help with paperwork. Communication is paramount. Good refresher for the follow-up while the injured worker is on workers' comp. How to better communicate with the safety department to increase our safety processes. Celebrate what is working well.
That's a good one. That's a good one probably to stop on, actually. Celebrate what's working well, right? And I've heard so many different things that people picked up on today, and it's great to hear those coming back. Sometimes, you know, Phaedra and I worked on this presentation and we're trying to provide you with a lot of information, but hearing it come back from you guys reminds me how much we actually covered. So that was great. All right, so we started out by pointing out some of the areas and goals that safety and HR share. And we went on to discuss how working together on these shared points can improve results for both safety and HR. With hiring a new employee, safety needs to be more involved to help find the right people and to ensure that safety expectations are set right up front. And then from there, we jumped to another common intersection, accidents and claims. And we talked about how HR can help safety with planning ahead for the worst, how safety can include HR on investigations, and the two can share information and work together to resolve the claim by actively caring for the injured worker, tracking the progress of the claim, and returning employees to work. And then finally, we talked about manager responsibilities, understanding protocols, and using positive reinforcement to get better results. We called this the intersection of safety in HR, but the reality is that there's a lot of overlap between the two. And to have a successful safety program and culture, the two have to work together, whether that's two departments or an HR person working with the operations manager. And that's going to differ for every department, that every company that joined us today, right? Because we're all companies of different sizes and we have different departments. But we hope that we gave you some ideas for how to use each other to reach your goals, because we're actually better together when we work together. And COVID was a good example of that. Amanda, I know you said you had at least one question, so we wanted to open it up for questions now.
Yeah, I do have one question that I know came in earlier, and I was actually sifting through some of the questions. Obviously, we had a lot of responses, so I could see whether or not any came in the meantime. But the question I had earlier on in the presentation was, we struggle with our provider to do a quality health check. Does anyone have a provider that they use that they are happy with and offer a quality health check?
Adria, that sounds like pre-hire. So I'm going to let you take that one.
Well, for me, right, so my brain got a little stuck, and my thing is right, what is the application of this idea? So if it is a pre-hire for checking their fitness for the job, make sure you have a good job description, make sure you know what the position is, and if you're not pleased or you don't feel that the clinic you've chosen to do that health check with is doing it well, I would absolutely look for a different occupational health clinic to conduct that for you. So remember, it needs to be job specific and tailored to each individual job. They can't be broad. So I think that goes along with that. If it's for a different, if the question is asking something different, please type it in your question or chat box, send it to Amanda. And what Amanda's going to do is she's going to compile a list for Erica and I. She'll send them to us. Erica and I will answer each question, and then Amanda will send the response back to the attendee who asked the question. Erica?
I think I heard something a little bit different. I think they're looking for a new provider. So my suggestion, because everyone who's in this session is from different parts of the country, usually the clinic that you use is the same one that you would use for your workers' comp, right? So where you're sending people if they get injured at work. You can always go back to your carrier and ask them if they have suggestions or lists of providers in your area, and they may be able to provide you with different options, and then go out and meet with them and talk to them about your concerns and what you want them to do, because you can set those expectations for providers.
Thank you, Erica. See, 2 brains, 2 answers. So if anybody has any questions that didn't get answered, Amanda's going to compile those, send them to us, and we'll take care of those for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for attending today's webinar presented by Heffernan. We will send information by email with instructions on how to access a copy of the presentation on our website. Thank you again to Erica Phaedra for your time and expertise today. We hope all of the attendees found today's webinar to be a valuable use of time. Be sure to join us on January 24th for our Office Ergonomics for the Workplace and Remote Workers webinar. Thank you so much and have a safe day, everyone.